We are at Perry Bar Police Station. I am PC Michelle Akers. Do you know why you're here today?
To do with the fire at the factory.
Okay. Tell me about that day.
Went to work, clocked in as normal. After a couple of minutes, he opened the door and he shouted, "Fire, fire." And there was just too much smoke. And then the lights went out.
The fire service and West Midlands Police have been called to a major fire at a factory on an industrial estate in central Birmingham. As firefighters struggle to contain the fire, officers from West Midlands Police are monitoring from a safe distance.
Are we looking at an accident or are we looking at a crime? Due to the scale of the fire, our suspicions are raised. Is it arson? Arson can be a deliberate act, or it can be that somebody has been reckless. Whilst that fire continues to burn, every second that passes, we are potentially losing really crucial evidence.
Despite 50 firefighters battling the flames for 3 hours, the fire is continuing to spread. The site is too dangerous for police to access. But fire investigators are already at the scene.
It's a big fire. Certainly one of the biggest that I've attended as a fire investigator.
Luke Beckett begins an examination of the fire site to see if he can gain access.
Where did you start?
The very nature of the fact that it's a fire scene, it's highly, highly dangerous. You've got to consider whether there are hazards there that have the potential to cause you harm.
It's not sound at all.
Due to the severity of the fire at this moment in time, I certainly can't get in to examine anything. And that can be frustrating. All the time, that material burns, potential pieces of evidence can be consumed by the fire. And not only that, but the water used to extinguish the fire can also destroy evidence. I need to get as much evidence as possible to help the police find out what and who is responsible.
It doesn't look good.
The 6,000 square foot factory recycles plastic components and employs 18 members of staff, who have now all been accounted for.
The fire could have killed people. We know that there were 2 employees that were working at the time, and it's only miraculously and by the sheer grace of God that those 2 employees have managed to get out unscathed. I want to know what has happened. How has that fire started? What is the cause of the fire? And is somebody responsible for starting that fire?
The police asked for statements from the 2 night shift workers, the only members of staff on site when the fire began.
Not at the minute, not at the minute. Just give us a bit of time.
What we know from that factory was that there was lots of plastic material. Once heated, the thermoplastic will start to soften and then they'll begin to melt. You can get drips and runs of melted material. It's almost lava-like. You're looking at a fire that's certainly going to be in excess of 1,000 degrees. With a fire this big, we could be left with virtually nothing to examine. So there's no time to waste.
Lads, are we in Sector 4?
Even though I can't access the factory,
Yeah.
work can be done without having to actually physically step foot inside that premise. Like, where does the gas come into the site? Where the electric isolation is for the site? All of these things are building a picture. If I see fences that have been removed or damaged, then I obviously want to establish whether or not the fire service have done that, or has someone forced entry to that fencing to gain access to the site, to then potentially start a fire on site.
Was that bit of fencing cut out by us, do you know?
If we discover that somebody's broken in and started that fire, this completely changes the whole investigation. Are we then looking for somebody who is potentially going to be a real risk to the public?
It's now been 4 hours since the fire broke out. Luke continues to work to protect the potential evidence.
The whole building now, all the steelworks collapsed in. Yeah. Where's the CCTV DVR?
It's there.
Yeah.
There's a desk with a computer, and it's right there, right at the side.
Okay, all right.
If those cameras had captured some footage of the development of that fire, or someone starting that fire, it could be crucial to how the investigation develops.
I'm not going to get in there tonight. They'll be putting it out all night. What I'm hoping is that maybe the CCTV DVR may be in a position that isn't as badly affected.
Luke will have to wait until tomorrow to see if the CCTV recorder can be recovered. With the fire now largely extinguished, Luke meets with fellow fire investigator Jason Dean to review footage sent in from the public.
The first few calls that came in, some of the callers captured this initial footage from one of the neighbouring units.
Yeah.
It's certainly helpful to know the severity of it at such an early stage in the incident. What the footage can do is it can take us back to quite close to when that fire has ignited.
The priority is to find the exact location the fire began in order to be able to investigate the cause of the blaze.
This one, I think, is slightly earlier. It's not quite as developed, and we can see just how severely it's venting from that front roller shutter there.
With this particular one, what you class as a very big fire in a difficult location, it's going to be a nightmare for the investigator that has to determine what had gone wrong.
After identifying an area of the factory where the fire may have started, Luke can now enter the site to assess any potential evidence that remains. First, he gets an update on where the fire crews have been able to salvage the CCTV system.
So, inside the office, apparently, is the CCTV DVR that covers all of the cameras internally as well.
We managed to stop the fire getting into that office.
All right, lovely.
If we could unplug the lot,
Yeah.
put the DVR,
Yeah,
the
in the
monitor,
bag.
everything in the bag,
Yeah,
bring the
okay.
whole lot out.
Okay, I'll get that sorted, mate.
In cases such as this, where we're faced with massive destruction of the building. We considered the CCTV to be critical. It's great that we've got the hard drives. However, we don't know whether they were working at the time of the fire. We don't know whether the cameras were positioned to capture the fire's development. So, yeah, there is an anticipation of, is it going to provide us with those answers?
The drives are sent to digital specialists to establish whether any footage of the fire exists. In the meantime, Luke is able to rule out forced entry.
That hole in the fence was caused by firefighters who cut that section of fencing out in the process of carrying out their firefighting.
Amazed how quick it went.
Factory manager Andrew Osborne and employee Lee Cope have been called in to assist Luke in his investigation.
Quite distressing. Not much else.
Obviously, it's plastic, it burns once it catches fire, but it's very hard to catch fire, so... Strange mystery, I think.
How many people had you got on site?
There would have been the night shift. It was just 2 of those.
OK.
Andrew and Lee had both finished work and handed over to the 2 night shift workers before the fire began.
They're the only 2 people on site. Good employees.
They'd worked with us for years.
And both worked with you for a long time.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you think I've not mentioned or would be potentially pertinent?
I don't know. I mean, it's just a normal day for us. It was
Yeah.
Nothing untoward, nothing out of the ordinary happened. It was just a normal day.
PC Michelle Akers reviews the statements given the previous day by the night shift workers who escaped the fire.
So at 16:10 hours, night shift worker arrives. So the site manager's left at 4:30, and then the other night shift person arrives at 4:30. Right, OK, so the night shift have walked around the yard to discuss what they've got to do for that night. They hadn't noticed anything untoward, unusual, any burning, no smell of smoke. Neither of them smoked a cigarette. At approximately 16:40 hours, one of the night shift workers walks from the canteen onto the factory floor and then sees smoke and flames. 10 minutes. There is a 10-minute window which is unaccounted for from when the day shift left to the night shift starting. What has happened in those 10 minutes that has caused so much devastation? We know that 2 night shift workers were the only 2 people within the building at that time. Is there something they're not telling us? Are we looking at an accident? Are we looking at somebody's actions have been reckless? Are we looking at something deliberate? So this is where I now need to ask forensics to see if they can get me any leads.
At the site, Luke begins work to determine the exact origin of where the fire first broke out.
Lee, have a look at this, mate.
He shows day shift worker Lee the footage of the blaze to try to pinpoint the location.
It seems to be in between the wall of the warehouse and the factory.
But that certainly tallies with what we've just seen on the video, doesn't it, mate?
Yeah.
You know, through there. OK. Right, let me grab my mask then. We'll go in. We will look for fire patterns that are displayed within the scene. How the steel which was supporting the roof has failed and the structure of the building is collapsed could be an indication of how that fire has potentially developed.
Everything has got a temperature where it will turn to liquid. What happens, though, well before it turns to liquid, is it starts to soften, and the weight of the building bearing down on that steel girder or steel support is too much, and it twists and sort of falls out of shape.
You move down this line here, and they gradually get worse and worse and worse, to the point where the steel's completely bent over. It's lost all its structural integrity, and it's collapsed. Which is not too far away from where that fire had broken through the roof. That's the prolonged area of heat, thus causing the steels to fail more in that particular area. We can't necessarily use that as a definitive, but it certainly would tally with the damage that we can see to the remaining steels that are still in place.
If I'm right on the spot, give me the thumbs up. All right.
Right there.
This area here is where I think the initial burning material were located.
This is where the fire started.
Having established where he thinks the fire originated, Luke can now begin to search for any clues on how the fire began.
So I'm potentially looking for electrical cablings, heaters, that kind of stuff. Anything that we would look at it and go, oh, that might have started a fire.
If you can't find an ignition source, it can be very suspicious. Might be the fact that somebody wants to cover his tracks.
You know the roof sheets you've took up so far, have the top ones lay that way?
Yeah, generally, yeah, that's right.
That could be an indication that the roof's failed before this partition wall.
It might be the case that during the fire, parts of the ceiling and wall covering started to collapse on top of other parts of the building where we've got evidence. So the early evidence in the scene still remains because it's been smothered by other items that have fallen.
You would look at the debris left from a fire in terms of its layers. The lower down the layers we go, it becomes of more significance. You follow this process in the hope that you come to your conclusion about how that fire started.
Okay. I don't think we can do a lot more.
No smoking gun, eh?
There isn't, mate.
With no obvious ignition source, Luke questions the staff about the company's working practices.
I mean, we recycle any plastic as long as it's clean.
Yeah.
And as long as it's sorted.
The business recycles plastic components, which are separated into different types of plastic on site before being ground down into granules.
And I send it to you in this form to then granulate.
We granulate it and resell it.
Got you.
You've got to talk to the people that work there to give you some ideas of the processes that go on inside the factory.
Hot work outside.
Yeah.
This certainly has sustained a fair amount of damage. Now, would this forklift have been inside the unit?
Yeah, definitely.
So this one was definitely inside the unit when the two night shift lads come on?
Definitely.
All of them would be, yeah.
All of them, okay. Yeah. Are they gas-powered, electric?
All diesel.
All diesel.
Moving beyond the location that the fire started, Luke widens his search and looks for any evidence of smoking within the facility.
There's a light there. That looks like it's just been discarded by someone who's used it up. No lights of fuel inside.
Back at Solihull Fire Station, Luke meets up with Jason to review all his findings.
I believe that our area of origin is in between these two. Okay?
What's the smoking policy?
No smoking on site.
Was there any evidence of smoking on site?
Apart from the lighter. And what I found was no evidence of carelessly discarded cigarette butts on site.
Gas supplies or...?
No.
And is any of this stuff in contact with any of the lighting in the building?
No. Got some initial concerns about diesel forklifts, which they use. So they're diesel, essentially, all the forklifts on site. They're not electric. Has one of these forklifts reversed its exhaust pipe into one of these stillages, and you've then got heat transfer. So
high-level exhaust on the forklifts, then?
They were just above the benching on the back.
Right.
So had someone have reversed in, looking at the potential surface temperature of the exhaust at anywhere between 300 and 600 degrees, there was the potential there.
But even at the outlet?
Yeah, this is the thing. So the manifold would be about 300, but at the outlet, the actual pipe outlet, it's not going to be that hot.
No.
So it's probably highly unlikely.
OK. You don't see anybody in any footage you've got?
I'd need to check when we get the CCTV from inside the unit.
What you got for me then, eh?
So we've got 2 DVRs from an incident that I attended and currently investigating.
Luke brings the CCTV hard drive recovered from the scene of the fire to a digital forensic specialist to see if any footage can be retrieved.
The actual premise itself is severely damaged by fire, but we managed to get these out.
Yeah, I've seen on the press, mate. Is it still burning, or...?
Yeah, I think we've still got a crew there just damping down.
With little evidence on the ground, Luke is relying on the CCTV to provide a breakthrough.
Fire service come to me to provide them with a definitive answer, yes or no. Can we recover this footage? The implication could be the difference between a conviction and no conviction. So, isolate the hard drive. So that'll power the system up. So we're into the system now. They're currently in a state of non-record.
OK.
That would indicate potentially that, it's not been recorded.
If the CCTV has failed to record, it would be another big setback for the investigation.
Just doing that, I don't think there is. When a system's not in a state of record, the first question you're asking yourself is this a perpetrator, an individual, actively getting involved to delete or interrupt the recording of a hard drive? Sometimes you don't know if you're going to recover that footage up until the point you access that system. So we can hopefully now have a look and let you know what's on it.
OK,
If anything. So, video playback. Oh, yeah, some footage. As you can see, there's quite a lot of footage from the 10th. It's good to have a bit of luck sometimes, isn't it? Yeah, yeah. It's highly...
We all need a bit of luck.
Absolutely. I'm just going to quickly scan through. I'll let you review it, your heart's content.
Right,
If we just get to something like resembling the time, just so as a reference point. You just scan along, so you can go by hour.
Oh, OK, so that's quite interesting.
Yeah.
And what's fantastic, that camera has managed to pick up the first flame. My concern was that this would be obscured. The fact that it's in view, that's great. So you can start to see the products of combustion that are coming off the top of the fire, so you've got quite thick smoke.
It's already out of control.
And obviously with the material that they got stored in there, the speed at which that has happened is very quickly. The workers attempted to remove the burning stillages to try and save the unit.
Not my area of expertise, but that seemed unbelievably dangerous. This camera is already under a significant strain in terms of the heat. The fire is so intense that the camera will melt. Camera 1, that's about to drop off.
Having seen the blaze breaking out, Luke now focuses on the 10-minute window between the night workers beginning their shift and the fire taking hold.
The interesting thing for me is where's the source of ignition come from for that to have caught?
Yeah.
So I'm just interested in this first 10, 15 minutes before the fire in that area of the factory.
Yeah, you can track it back as much as you need, really.
They're the 2 night shift workers. So these are the only 2 workers on site. I think they're doing their initial walk round before they start their night's work. And they're very close to where this fire is starting. That's the stillage, that's the container that was used to store the raw plastic material. What are you doing?
Interesting.
If we just let it run for a second. I'm looking for the first moment that I see what appears to be a flame.
Luke asks for a closer look at what the night shift workers were doing at the plastic stillage just before it set on fire.
There's a bit of movement there, but there's a bit of movement there now.
Yeah.
See that flame then, that flick?
Yeah, potentially. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, he walks away and 1 minute later.
Less than a minute, I'll see a flicker of flame. Some questions need to be answered here. I'm just wondering whether we could maybe zoom in. Is that possible?
The problem with that is what you have is a set number of pixels to an image.
Okay.
If you stretch them,
Yeah.
it stretches each individual pixel. The clarity's around it. You'll barely recognise that as a human being by the time you zoom in. People believe CSI programs that exist, that in seconds they can enhance something from something that's illegible to clear. And that does create a problem in the real world. You can't add pixels because that's manipulating the evidence.
Yeah.
So in terms of the footage in that essence, it's probably the best we've got. Okay. We are often asked, can you zoom in on there? Can you drill down on the details? But often it's very much governed by the quality of the cameras and the system itself.
Leans in. Appears to put something inside the stillage. His arm, lean forward.
Yeah.
And then he looks around. And then he walks off. Hello, Fire Control, it's Luke here, Fire Investigation. Having viewed the CCTV, starting to think that this is potentially arson. Have we got anyone at the Tysley fire still, mate? Can we get a message to them? There's 2 what look like burnt stillages at the front of the factory unit. Can we just make sure that they don't get touched, moved or removed from the site? Yeah, it's looking deliberate, mate. We need to protect that evidence as best as we can, because it could be crucial.
Michelle and police staff investigator Sophia Iqbal review the recovered CCTV footage.
So that's 16:28. It looks like that's him on his own. He looks left and then he looks right. The CCTV is really crucial. It's really compelling and actually it's quite incriminating. So we're now looking at whether or not one of the workers has actually committed the offence of arson. So he stood at that
bottom container.
Yeah. Look, yeah.
Leans in with his left hand.
Yeah.
Left arm.
It looks as though he throws something into that. Why didn't he mention this in the statement? It makes me wonder what other information he's then withholding from us and why. So 16:44, that fire's now spread.
His body language and the way he's moving,
Oh,
he's
yeah,
just so relaxed as he...
OK, so white chap comes on screen. He looks quite worried. And he's just stood there. He's on his phone. Who is he calling? Is he calling 999? Or is he calling somebody else? I'd be interested to know how long he's worked for the company for and whether or not there's been any disciplinary issues, whether he's got any grievances with the company themselves.
Or anybody else.
Or anybody else within the company. His reaction compared to the older chap's reaction is certainly a lot more... There just doesn't seem to be any urgency.
Scrolling back to earlier in the CCTV, police discover some footage that could lead to an alternative theory.
At 16:26, he was seen with what could be a cigarette. Was he smoking? So was it a cigarette butt that he's flicked in there? In his first account, the suspect says that he hadn't smoked at work that day. Is he lying? Has he just discarded that lit cigarette butt into that stillage? Is that what's caused the fire? When you think of arson, most people think it's a deliberate act. However, the other aspect of arson is whether or not somebody's been reckless in their actions. Did they know that what they were doing could cause that fire? Recklessness can still form part of criminal conduct. But that CCTV doesn't confirm that he's actually started the fire. We still need forensics to confirm it for us.
Now that the CCTV has provided the exact location of the fire, Luke revisits the scene with forensic scene investigator Tracy Wakeman to hunt for any other evidence that could help police build their case.
This is where these stillages come from. Inside there is essentially just molten plastic.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
want some close-ups of that then?
just some close-up to that.
Yeah.
Having that relationship with the scenes of crime officers is equally important as any other tool that you've got in your toolbox. And they will see things that you won't see. They will tell you whether it's viable evidence that you're thinking of retrieving and whether they can analyse it and test it and get a positive result from it.
So we're now in an area where the forklifts would operate, but then the route out was down this side here.
Yeah.
Okay, just hold it there a sec. Just have a quick look.
Like fingerprint doing no ice, you're not getting anything.
Just get a photo of it.
We go to every scene trying to find as much evidence as we can, but obviously sometimes there just isn't any forensic evidence left. If something has been in a fire of that magnitude, it's not going to yield any DNA. But as an FSI, it's very important, the photography. It's an evidential record of the actual scene as it was at the time.
All I'm going to take is just a sample of each of the plastic components within the stillages. Just some of these.
With the remains photographed, samples of the plastic material undamaged by the fire can now be collected as evidence.
Once forensic evidence like the DNA and fingerprints have been destroyed in a fire like that, it's down to find other types of evidence that would help in an investigation.
So these would have been in there, would they?
They were, yeah.
And then they pulled them out.
These were right in the point of origin, these were.
Right. Take some close-ups of that and that bit there then, and if you ask him, we can get them. That's perfect.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah.
Police ask both night shift workers to give further statements. There is no evidence the older worker has had any involvement in the fire, so officers quickly rule him out of the investigation. The worker seen at the stillage moments before the fire agrees to come to the station to give a detailed voluntary interview.
Do you know why you're here today?
Yeah.
Tell me why you're here.
To do with the fire at the factory.
Okay. Do you enjoy your job?
Yes.
Yeah?
It's not the best, but pays the wage.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, like, there's always a better job out there.
Okay, and do you get on well with the people that...
Yes.
Yeah, the people that work there?
Yeah.
Okay. Ever had any issues or been in trouble whilst you've been there?
No.
Okay, so you've not had to face any disciplinary proceedings?
No.
Okay. Do you smoke?
Yes.
You do? Okay. What do you smoke?
I smoke tobacco.
Roll up?
Yeah. Smoking, you smoke outside the gates.
Okay. That fire absolutely destroyed that whole yard and warehouse.
It did.
Have you started that fire deliberately?
No.
Okay. You said to me that you used your mobile phone to call the fire brigade.
I did.
There's no record of you using your mobile phone to call 999. Did you dial 999 from your mobile phone?
Yes, I did.
So why is it not registering with 999?
You told me.
Were you calling somebody else to say the fire's done, the job's done?
No.
Did somebody pay you to start that fire deliberately?
No.
Is there an insurance claim?
No.
Has somebody said to you, yeah, do this for me and I'll pay you a huge whack of money from the insurance money?
No, that's true.
I'll tell you what I think. I think something's going on that you're not telling me. Is there anything that you want to tell me or anything that you want to say?
No.
The day before the suspect came in for interview, Michelle met Luke to conduct simulations of different ignition scenarios.
So we're the longest established fire investigation team in the country, and we don't just kick a bit of dirt around and guess what the cause of a fire is. There's more and more science being involved, and the fire investigators are having to prove their hypotheses by showing factual scientific methods to prove that their hypotheses are correct. It's that intrigue of trying to find out what happened and getting to the bottom of something. Being a dog with a bone, that's what it's about.
Okay, so what we've got is the plastic polypropylene sprues from the stillages that were removed in the first stages of the fire.
Okay.
And some of it has actually got a bit of heat damage to it.
They test samples of plastic recovered from the stillage container to see if the fire could have been started by the suspect discarding the cigarette.
We could probably put that material in one of our containers and then introduce a cigarette to see how it behaves. And also we can do a proper lighter burn test on it as well.
It'd be interesting to know if it does catch and at what point.
So this is now about getting to the heart of the forensic side of carrying out fire investigation to make sure that we're testing what we think has occurred.
I think you can already see the filter's now fallen off. Essentially, it's dropped. So it's about 10 minutes.
10 minutes. With the CCTV, it shows 60 seconds from when he's there to when that fire was started. Have we got any melting or...?
No. It wasn't a cigarette. There wasn't the sufficient heat release from a cigarette to cause this plastic to combust.
The cigarette theory is ruled out. Luke tests another possible source of ignition.
We're just going to do a naked flame burn test on this and see how the material behaves.
Okay.
We know that we're looking at approximately sort of 10 to 15 seconds where the potential perpetrator leans forward and uses what we believe could have been a lighter. So we'll just kind of replicate that, which we saw on CCTV.
How did that fire start? The only thing you've got left out of your investigation is deliberate application of a naked flame, so a lighter or a match or something similar. So the idea then is not, OK, that's what it is. You've then got to test that hypothesis to see. So what you've got to try and do then is prove yourself wrong.
It's certainly sustaining the flame, isn't it? And it's now involving a bit more material underneath.
Yeah. So we've got dripping already.
Yeah. So if I look into the container, you can see that some of the lower material...
It's caught, has it?
Yeah, it's beginning to become involved as well.
OK.
And it's quite consistent to what we saw on the CCTV.
So we can say conclusively that that fire was started with a naked flame.
This is a substantial breakthrough. Luke meets with Jason to review his findings.
Just to bring you up to date then, liaising with the police, what we decided to do was do a series of test burns on some recovered plastic material. It supports my hypothesis of this is a naked flame ignition. And what we were talking about...
Did it burn in a similar way? Did it burn with a flickering flame to start with and then...
Yeah, absolutely. It was really consistent with what we saw on the CCTV.
With regards to him setting the fire, the forensic evidence is there to show that he did that, but it doesn't show us that his intention was to commit arson. If they've set that fire deliberately, why don't they just let it get to this point, pretend they notice, and just evacuate? Why do they try and pull stuff out? So what would they do themselves out of the
where's the
job?
motivation for them to essentially burn down their workplace? Difficult one to explain, that is.
You've got to find out what he was doing. And it better be a good explanation, I think.
I don't particularly think he's been very open and honest, and we've got some gaps that I want him to fill. If he can't account for what he was doing immediately before that fire starts, then that's certainly going to increase my suspicion. Why didn't he tell me he was stood there by that stillage moments before the fire had started? What is he hiding? Right. So I'm going to take you to the day of the fire now.
Okay.
For the purposes of the recording, I'm showing CCTV recovered. Mails come onto screen. Is that you?
Yeah.
Okay. What's going on there?
Basically, that's where we was walking around, and there was like 2-3 stacks. Like sometimes we get contaminated stuff. Well, I mean,
So the plastics
could be like 2 different plastics.
So bearing in mind this is where you've been stood, okay?
Yeah.
And now we can see a flame. Did you see that?
Yeah.
How long do you think that was? From you stood there to that flame happening?
A minute.
So what do you think caused that then?
I don't know.
So I have a statement
Okay.
from the fire officer, Luke Beckett. With the evidence currently available to me, it is my considered opinion that the cause of this fire was the deliberate application of a naked flame ignition source to available combustible material. What do you think that means?
It's been done deliberately. I just come to my mind, like, I did light something to test it and smelt it, and then I blew it and I threw it back.
Sorry,
Yes.
just go back. Tell me about that.
Light it up and see if it's the right plastic, basically, because every plastic smells different.
Why didn't you tell him?
So
Do you
that
not
time-
think that might have been
No.
relevant?
Like, just get in my head at the time.
I just don't get it. Why didn't he mention this before? You would think that they would understand the risk involved. How well did you put that piece of plastic out?
I blew it, I smelt it and threw it back in the stillage.
Yeah. Have you maybe forgotten to blow it out when you put it back in?
That could be a possibility, but...
Did you
like
think
I
maybe
said,
throwing it back in would cause it to go out?
No.
So do you think if it wasn't put out, do you think you were reckless or negligent?
No, I was not.
I think that you've taken a piece of plastic, you've held it in a flame, you've not extinguished it at all, and you've put it back in the stillage.
No, couldn't do that.
That's the only way it could have occurred.
No.
We've got a business now that's
Yeah.
been destroyed, we've got people losing their jobs. How do you feel?
I feel really bad.
To find out more about working practices at the factory, Michelle speaks to the loss adjuster handling the insurance claim into the fire and calls Luke in for a meeting.
They've told us about this practice that they do. I was like, are you kidding me?
The loss adjuster reports that the practice of testing plastic by setting it alight, called burn testing, may have been commonplace in the facility.
Now, he says that they regularly take a small runoff of plastic, use a lighter to burn the end of that piece of plastic, and do a very crude test, as in smell it and look at the smoke that's coming off. And then it's put out. And I think that is to establish what type of plastic it is. That piece of plastic is then put back in the same stillage.
They conduct a burn test within a stillage in a factory full of stillages of plastic and then leave it. The phrase playing with fire springs to mind, and it could not be more apt. If that's what they're doing, then I find that absolutely gobsmacking.
I could not believe that.
At no stage did anyone indicate to me that they would have done a burn test on the material within the area which is now clearly the area of origin.
Absolutely.
I find that highly surprising.
Learning about the burn test and how they do that burn test, I'm just stunned. If that's company policy, that's how they test plastic material, that seems inherently dangerous. However, as a police officer, I've still got to consider that the suspect is carrying out a burn test that he's been trained to do, that he does regularly, that for him is standard practice. Even if there was no intention to deliberately start that fire, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not a crime. It still remains his responsibility that that piece of plastic that he's doing that burn test on has been fully extinguished.
Michelle reviews the tests from the fire simulator to see whether an extinguished piece of the plastic could have reignited and caused the blaze.
This is essentially a replication of a burn test. So, light it, blow it out, introduce it to the pot.
Okay.
It's not flaming, it's not going to reignite.
No, it's not caught. That's pretty clear cut then.
Yeah.
No burn with blowing it out. We've held that piece of plastic in a flame. We made sure that piece of plastic was fully extinguished, and then we put it back in with the rest of the plastic. Nothing happened. No fire starts at all. The suspect believes that he extinguished that piece of plastic, that it wasn't alight when he put it back in the stillage. But we know from that test it must have been. There is no other explanation as to how that fire could have started. In my opinion, it's a reckless action, which is a serious indictable offence and comes with a long prison sentence. Hello, it's Michelle Akers from West Midlands Police.
Michelle applies for a charge of arson with recklessness as to whether life was endangered.
There is a realistic prospect of proving that suspect reintroduced a still burning piece of plastic, for example, failed to extinguish the piece he conducted the burn test on, and that he was criminally reckless in doing so. This fire was so devastating. I think it's only by the grace of God that there were no injuries. I think we have to take it to CPS and see what we could do in terms of getting a charge.
While police wait for the Crown Prosecution Service to reach a decision, they begin to prepare the case for court.
I need to question the company about these burn tests.
Hello?
Hello, is that Andrew?
It is, yes.
Hi, Andrew, it's Michelle over at West Midlands Police. You all right?
Yeah, I'm fine, thanks.
Michelle contacts the factory manager, Andrew, to find out more information about the company's safety procedures around burn tests.
In the time that you've been working there,
yeah,
has there ever been a time where a piece of plastic may have ignited more pieces in the stillages?
Many years ago. Well, we had a stillage on fire outside in the yard, long time ago. It was coming off the lorry and it was tested.
Ah, right, okay. Was that a result of a burn test not being conducted properly?
Yeah.
Okay. Were there any new procedures put in place following that, do you know?
No, not to my knowledge.
With you being the works manager, would that mean that you've communicated that incident to your employees to say, look, just be careful, make sure it's extinguished properly, because this could happen?
Well, yeah, to my employers, yeah. Well, I didn't tell anyone else higher up the chain, if I'm honest, because it was so small.
The works managers just told me they did have a fire some years ago as a result of burn testing. I don't understand why, knowing how quickly he's told me that fire spread last time, how has this happened again? It just feels to me like it was an accident waiting to happen.
The revelation that burn tests were standard practice at the factory, despite the previous fire, could have major implications for the case against the suspect.
These burn tests are clearly not safe. And CPS now need to decide whether or not there is a realistic prospect of conviction. I wouldn't like to say either way because I just don't know which way it's going to go.
The police submit all of the evidence to the Crown Prosecution Service, who conduct a detailed review of the case.
Hi, Michelle.
So a senior barrister has had a look over the case.
Okay.
And he takes the view that a jury is very unlikely to convict a defendant in these circumstances. So the case has been dropped, not going to court, and that's it.
My job isn't to get a conviction. My job is to gather as much evidence as possible to try and find the answers to the questions. Sometimes you can collect all the forensic evidence to find out that a crime hasn't been committed.
The prosecuting barrister has decided that actually there are too many things that may cause a jury to think, actually, it's not the suspect's fault. It's frustrating because a lot of hours have gone into this investigation. But at the end of the day, it's CPS who ultimately decide whether or not the evidence is strong enough. I think with hindsight, knowing how the burn tests were conducted, it's the right decision not to prosecute him, and maybe we should be looking at the practices of that company instead. It was really quite a catastrophic fire. There's a long-standing business that is now completely ruined, and people could have lost their lives. Hopefully, there can be some learning from this, industry-wide.
What does it take to work in forensic science? To find out more and watch exclusive interviews with some of the programme's featured investigators, visit bbc.co.uk/RealCSI and follow the links to the Open University.